The mirror never lies. Those words echoed in Daniel's mind as he stared at the ornate antique mirror in his newly rented apartment. Carved from dark mahogany and etched with intricate silver patterns, the mirror dominated the small living room, reflecting more than just the dimly lit space. It had a presence, an unsettling allure that Daniel couldn't shake. He hadn't noticed it during his initial walkthrough, yet there it was, fixed to the wall as though it had always belonged there. Daniel moved closer, drawn by a strange compulsion. His own reflection stared back, eyes tired and hollow, skin pale under the flickering ceiling light. The journey from his hometown to this unfamiliar city had drained him. A new job, a new life, all in search of a fresh start. Yet, he couldn't shake the feeling that something about this place felt wrong. He reached out, fingertips grazing the mirror's cold surface. A shiver ran down his spine. For a moment, he thought he saw something, just a flicker in the reflection. A shadow that didn't belong. He shook his head, brushing it off as exhaustion. Get some sleep, he told himself. That night, sleep didn't come easily. Shadows danced on the walls, and the creaking of old wood seemed louder in the stillness. Every noise felt amplified. Every corner of the room seemed to hide a secret. But it was the mirror that kept drawing his attention. Even with his eyes closed, he could feel it, watching. Around 3 a.m., a soft tapping sound jolted him awake. He sat up, heart pounding. The room was cloaked in darkness, but the mirror's faint outline was visible against the far wall. The tapping continued, steady, rhythmic, tap, tap, tap. He approached it cautiously. "Hello?" he whispered, feeling ridiculous. Silence. Then, as he turned to walk away, it happened. The reflection in the mirror didn't move. Daniel froze. His breath caught in his throat. He waved his hand, blinked, trying to dismiss it as a trick of the mind. But the reflection remained still, staring at him with an intensity that made his skin crawl. Slowly, ever so slowly, the reflection smiled, a cruel, twisted grin that didn't belong to him. He stumbled back, heart racing. No, this isn't real. The figure in the mirror tilted its head, eyes glinting with something dark and ancient. Then, it spoke. Its voice was a distorted echo, yet clear enough to send a chill through Daniel's bones. "You can't hide from me." Daniel's pulse thundered in his ears. He blinked, hoping the horrific vision would vanish. But the figure in the mirror remained, grinning like a predator that had cornered its prey. His own reflection, his own face, yet twisted and wrong. What do you want?" Daniel stammered, his voice barely above a whisper. The reflection didn't answer. Instead, it raised a hand, his hand, and pressed its palm flat against the inside of the mirror. The surface rippled like water, distorting the room's reflection. The figure's eyes darkened, becoming voids of shadow. "Your fears, your secrets, I know them all." Its voice slithered into Daniel's mind, a poisonous whisper that wrapped around his thoughts. Daniel stumbled back, colliding with the coffee table. A sharp pain shot through his leg, but he barely noticed. His eyes were locked on the mirror, on the malevolent version of himself that seemed to be trying to step through. Desperation clawed at him. This isn't happening. This can't be real. He bolted to the bedroom, slamming the door shut and pressing his back against it. His breath came in ragged gasps. The room was dark, but the faint glow of the mirror still seemed to seep through the cracks around the door. His mind raced, searching for an explanation. Sleep deprivation? A hallucination? Maybe he was losing his mind. Tap, tap, tap. The sound was softer now, but more insistent. It came from the other side of the door, seeping into the room like a dark promise. Daniel's hands shook. He needed to get out. He fumbled for his phone, the screen illuminating his terrified face. No signal, no Wi-Fi, of course. He paced the room, trying to think. He hadn't seen any other mirrors in the apartment, just the one in the living room. If he could get out of the building, maybe he could leave this nightmare behind. He grabbed his keys and cracked the door open, peeking into the living room. The mirror was silent now, its surface reflecting only the empty room. Maybe it's over. He stepped out cautiously, heart pounding with every step toward the front door. He avoided looking at the mirror. If he didn't look, maybe it couldn't hurt him. He reached for the doorknob, but it wouldn't turn. It was locked. He twisted harder, panic rising. Leaving so soon? The voice came from behind him, right by the mirror. Daniel turned slowly, dread pooling in his stomach. The figure was still there, but now it wasn't alone. Shadows swirled within the mirror, forming shapes, faces. They stared at him, eyes hollow, mouths open in silent screams. What is this place? Daniel's voice trembled. The reflection tilted its head. A doorway, a prison. It shows the truth, Daniel. Your truth. I don't understand. The mirror figure's eyes flashed. You will. Daniel's pulse quickened as the swirling faces in the mirror seemed to press closer, their silent screams echoing in his mind. Shadows curled like smoke, and the figure wearing his face stepped forward, its eyes filled with a dark, knowing intensity. What truth? What do you mean? Daniel's voice trembled, desperation creeping in. The reflection's smile widened. You've spent your life running, hiding from the shadows of your past. But the mirror sees all. It shows what you refuse to face. Daniel staggered back, memories clawing their way to the surface. Things he had buried deep. The mistakes, the betrayals, the fears. The time he let his friend take the fall for something he'd done. The way he'd abandoned his sister when she needed him most. Guilt surged like bile in his throat. No, he whispered, shaking his head. That's not who I am. The mirror figure stepped closer to the glass, its voice a whisper that seemed to seep into his bones. Isn't it? You've crafted a mask, Daniel, but masks can only hide so much. I am the part of you that you deny, the part that knows your every secret, every weakness. Daniel's knees buckled. Why now? What do you want from me? To set you free, the reflection hissed, or to replace you? The surface of the mirror rippled, and a sudden force pulled at Daniel. He stumbled, gripping the edge of the coffee table to keep from being drawn in. The room around him seemed to warp, the edges blurring, as though reality itself was bending. He looked up, panic clawing at his chest. The mirror figure had one hand through the glass, reaching toward him. Join me, it whispered, or I'll take your place. Daniel's mind raced. He couldn't let this thing escape, couldn't let it walk out into the world wearing his face. But how could he fight it? He glanced around, his eyes landing on the heavy paperweight on the table. Without thinking, he grabbed it and hurled it at the mirror. The glass shattered with a deafening crash. Shards rained down, scattering across the floor like fallen stars. The swirling shadows screamed, a sound that pierced through Daniel's mind. For a moment, everything seemed to freeze. The broken glass, the dark figures dissolving into smoke, the room bathed in an eerie silence. Daniel's breath came in ragged gasps. He stepped forward, heart pounding. The mirror was destroyed, the shadows gone. He was alone, or so he thought. A faint whispering laughter echoed in the room. He turned slowly, dread pooling in his stomach. In the largest shard of broken glass on the floor, his reflection smiled back at him. But it wasn't his smile. It was the mirror's. "You think it's over?" The reflection whispered, its voice a soft, mocking hiss. "The truth can't be shattered, Daniel. I'm still here. I'll always be here." The shard glowed, the edges darkening, shadows curling within it, like ink in water. Daniel stumbled back, but the pieces of the mirror around him began to twitch, pulling together, forming a web of glistening fragments. The reflection's eyes watched him from every piece. "You can't escape your own darkness," the voices whispered in unison. "It's only just begun." The room closed in around him, the air thick with shadows and dread. Daniel clutched his head, the voices growing louder, the world spinning. As the shards of the mirror pulled together, his reflection reached out once more, its voice cold and final. "Welcome to your truth." The light flickered, and everything went dark.